In this section on factoring trinomials using the square method, I'm going to show you a new method that I've learned that makes it a lot easier for students to factor trinomials with a number in front of the quadratic term. The first thing that you're always going to do in any type of factoring problem is factor out a GCF if you can. All right, then in this method, I'm going to show you multiply the first and the last term. So I get 50. Then you ask yourself, what are factors of 50 that I can add to get 27? I would say 25 times 2. 25 plus 2 gives me 27. 25 times 2 gives me 50. So now I'm going to draw this box. I'm going to write in it from left to right. Okay, so the first term goes in the first square, 5x squared. The last term, 10, goes in the last box. Now I'm going to use these terms that we came up with, 25 and 2, and I'm going to put 25x and 2x in the other two squares. It doesn't matter which one you put where. If you put 2x first and 25 next, it doesn't matter. Then I'm going to factor out the GCF of every row and every column. So in the first row, I could take out a 5x. The second row, I could take out a 2. The greatest common factor of the first column is an x. And the greatest common factor of the second column is 5. So your answer is x plus 5, because this is a positive 5, times 5x plus 2, because this is a positive 2. And that is your answer. All right, so we have 4x squared plus 24x plus 32. The first thing we do in every factoring problem is factor out the greatest common factor, which in this case is 4. I would be left with x squared plus 6x plus 8. Now, if I want to use the square method, what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply my first term, which is 1, an assumed 1, times that 8, and I'm going to get 8. What do you need to multiply to give you 8 that adds together to give you 6? A positive 4 and a positive 2. So with my box method, or square method, whatever you want to call it, I'll put my first term in the first box, my last term in the last box, and I'll put the 4 and the 2 here with x's. 4x and 2x. Now I'm going to take out the greatest common factor of every row and every column. So I would have an x in the first row, 2 in the second row, an x in the first column, and in the second column I would have a 4. So that would give me the x plus 4 and the x plus 2, because this is a positive 4 and a positive 2. But don't forget the greatest common factor that we pulled out in the beginning, which was the 4. In this problem, 3x squared plus 26x plus 35, there is no greatest common factor. So I'm going to multiply the 3 times the 35, and that would give me 105. So what are factors of 105 that add together to give me 26? 21 and 5. So I'm going to draw my box. I'm going to put the first term in the first square, the last term in the last square, and I'm going to use my factors that I got, 21x and 5x. Now I'm going to factor out the greatest common factor of each row in each column. So 3x, 5, x, and 7. So my answer is x plus 7 times 3x plus 5. Number 4 says 24x squared minus 22x plus 3. So I want to show you what happens when you have a negative in the middle. There is no greatest common factor besides 1, so I'm going to multiply my first term, my last term. So 24 times 3 is 72. So what are factors of 72 that would add together to give me a negative 22? Well, I know 18 times 4 is 72, and if I make those both negative, they would add together to give me a negative 22. So I'm going to draw my square. The first term goes in the first square. The last term goes in the last square. Then I'm going to put in my factors. So negative 18x and a negative 4x. And again, it does not matter which square you put those in. All right, so in the first row, I can take out a 6 and an x. The second row, there is no greatest common factor, but because the first number I run into right here is negative, I'm going to take out a negative 1. Then in the first column, my greatest common factor would be 4x. In my second column, 18 and 3, my greatest common factor would be 3, but since the first number I run into is negative, my greatest common factor has to be negative. So my answer would be 4x minus 3 and 6x minus 1. Number 5, I have 10x squared minus 23x plus 12. There is no greatest common factor that I can factor out, so I'm going to say my first time with my last, and I get 120. What are factors of 120 that would add together to give me a negative 23? Well, I know 15 times 8 gives me 120, and negative 15 and negative 8 would also give me 120, but they would add together to give me a negative 23. So I'm going to make my square. First term goes in the first square, last term goes in the last square, and then I can put these in the other two squares. Now, what's the greatest common factor of the first row? A 5x. The greatest common factor of the second row is a 4, and since my first thing that I run into here is negative, the 4 is going to be negative. My first column, the greatest common factor is a 2x. My second column, 15 and 12 would be 3, but since the first thing I run into is negative, that has to be negative. So I would get 2x minus 3 times 5x minus 4. The last problem I'm going to do today is 3x squared plus 7x minus 5. There's nothing that I can factor out, so I'm going to multiply 3 times negative 5, and I would get negative 15. So what are factors of negative 15 that would add together to give me 7? Well, what are factors of 15? I've got 1 and 15 and 3 and 5. None of those factors will give me a positive 7. So because no factors of 15 will give me 7, the answer is prime. It cannot be factored any further.